Shadowman was a huge AAA release from Acclaim's T-Side studio in the summer of '99. Despite being released on all consoles and operating systems, and also getting generally positive reviews, you may be surprised by just how much you didn't realise about the game's background story. Acclaim acquired the rights to the Valiant comic characters as part of the same deal that also allowed them to make games for Turok. Despite having an incredible backstory filled with horror, mysticism and mature storylines, along the game's development much of this lore was lost in the final build of the game. Now, unless like me you're one of those people that's obsessed with the world in which the game takes place, then chances are you never picked up on the comics, the game's manual, or read the secret files in the game to flesh out this macabre masterpiece. What gripped me most as a kid when playing the game for the first time was the fact that the game's 5 core bosses were all serial killers. I first heard of this when reading N64 magazine, and I was amazed at how detailed the developer was being with these key characters. Rather than creating entirely fictitious characters, the team were taking inspiration from real life events to carve the sinister psychopaths to Shadowman's foes. The game's 5 serial killers are collectively known as the Five, and so for today's video we're going to delve into the sickening truths behind Shadowman's serial killers. Serial killer number 1. Jack the Ripper. Also known as John G. Pierce in the game, Jack the Ripper is the first of the 5 which you see in the game. As part of its iconic intro sequence, Jack the Ripper is in an underground sewer, delivering a soliloquy where he recites the names of the many women whom he's killed and laments the fact that he has been unable to find solace in his actions. He is interrupted by Legion, whom recruits him to join him in Deadside, to create a cathedral of pain called the Asylum. This will act as the place for all the misunderstood individuals of the world, which includes serial killers, rapists, nonces, and worse. This piece of historical reimagining was incredible. The true identity of the real Jack the Ripper was unknown and is even debated to this day. However, by Acclaim making the game's Jack the Ripper an architect by trade, it allowed them to weave him seamlessly into the story as a vital character for Legion to recruit to help him actually design and build the asylum. But wait, it gets even more interesting because this opening cutscene in the game takes place on the 9th of November 1888, and it ends with Jack the Ripper agreeing to join Legion and taking his own life. What's significant about this date? Well, for those unaware, Jack the Ripper spread fear throughout London from late August to early November 1888. The last of his 7 victims, Mary Jane Kelly, was found dead in real life by her rent collector at around 10:45 AM on the 9th of November 1888. Therefore, the game's opening scene takes place that very day, and so Acclaim used the historical fact that there were no further real-life murders to choose the date when the game's Jack the Ripper took his own life to join Legion in Deadside. The files of the game do give some further details into the character. The real-life Jack the Ripper taunted police by sending letters to Scotland Yard which contained details that only the real killer would know. Scotland Yard received so many fake letters claiming to be from the real killer, but only 2 were deemed to be true enough due to the content they contained. The game, however, gives a slightly different version of events, and instead of 2 genuine letters, the game states that Jack the Ripper had left 2 poems as his calling card. The first poem was found on a wall in Shoreditch Station, which is not all that far away from Whitechapel. It reads, "The watchers of the gate of the souls shall make the way. The 5 are red in teeth and claw. The head, the heart, the hands and the eyes, all combine to create the 5. For we are many." Spoiler alert coming up, but for those who have played the game, you'll know that Jack the Ripper returns to our world from Deadside in the year 1999, which was the year of the game's release. To mark his return, he leaves a second twisted poem after he takes his first victim in the modern day. This poem reads, "The knife shall serve its bloody ritual, their sanguinary to return to a darker place, flesh running cold with the shredding tears, to shred, to cut, to slice, to know, the weeping wood and its glowing soul, for we are many." One final cool fact is that when you do eventually battle Jack the Ripper in the game, he only uses a 6-inch blade to attack you with melee attacks. The real life Jack the Ripper was known for disemboweling his victims using the same sharp instrument, and so yet again the developer wove historical accuracy into the game's fantasy setting. Serial killer number 2, Dr. Victor Batrakian. Born April 6, 1961, Victor Batrakian was the son of a wealthy banker in his native Switzerland and was quite a brilliant medical student, and by the time his education came to an end he held a PhD in forensic psychiatry and was a licensed medical practitioner. This gave him unlimited access to his victims. This deranged killer chose elderly women to target after convincing them to leave him huge sums of money in their wills. History is full of killer doctors, but perhaps none so much as Dr. Harold Shipman, who is easily regarded as one of the most prolific serial killers in modern history, with a rumoured 250 kills to his name. Acclaimed Studios are based in the north of England, and so they didn't have to look far for inspiration, as Dr. Harold Shipman was arrested in England in September of 1998, at the time of the game's development. Perhaps realising they were releasing a game which contained serial killers and this was too good of an opportunity to miss, or perhaps sheer coincidence, but the similarity to the game's Dr. Victor Batrakian and Dr. Harold Shipman are hard to deny. Dr. Harold Shipman was a practicing doctor after gaining his qualification in my town of Leeds, England. He was first reported to the authorities in March of 1998 when a colleague of his was contacted by a funeral director who was gravely concerned with the high death rate amongst Dr. Shipman's patients. The crematorium were also alarmed by the large number of cremation forms for elderly women which Dr. Shipman needed to be countersigned. The police, however, had little reason to suspect a doctor, a typically highly regarded member of society, and so they put inexperienced officers on the case who naturally couldn't find the required evidence to take the case further, and so Dr. Shipman was allowed to continue his murdering ways. That was, however, until August of 1998, when a victim's daughter contacted the police with some shocking information. Her mother had been declared dead, and the cause was simply put as old age. What shocked the daughter more than anything, however, was that Dr. Shipman was the last person to see her alive, and miraculously, a new will had been provided which left her entire estate, all £286,000, to Dr. Harold Shipman. This time, with a higher level of suspicion, the police mounted a new investigation. One of the key pieces of evidence against him was an old-fashioned typewriter found at his home, which matched the exact typeface which the fake will was created on. Now this is where the game and real life split, because Dr. Victor Batrakian realised the net was closing in and escaped to North America by, you guessed it, forging documents. Dr. Batrakian's North American killing spree continued until the time he was captured and sent to death row awaiting execution, which is when the game takes place. Like Jack the Ripper in the game, he would leave a calling poem with his victims which reads as follows: "The Lizard King shall lead the five, from out of the southern goal shall cut his bloody swathe. In him the darkness stands revealed, his eyes are void as a dead man's gaze, as cold as the light of a dying star, for we are many." Serial killer number 3, Milton Pike. Vietnam War Special Forces veteran Milton Pike is also known as the Video Nasty serial killer. In the early 90s he was arrested after picking up a hiker in the Cyprus National Reserve and then brutally murdering them. Before his trial he escaped, killing a further 2 deputies and evading search teams for over 4 years. This nutjob just couldn't keep a low profile, as just a few years later on his killing spree began again, and like many psychopaths, his preference was killing defenceless women. After stalking them, he took out a further 9 in the space of a year. He gained the moniker as the Video Nasty Killer as he sent 6 videotapes to haunt local law enforcement officers, which showed how he had hunted down his victims and then savagely killed them. Each victim was found with his poetic calling card, which read as follows: "And lo, if was should have a face, this one of the 5 would show at the bleeding mask, ears pricked to savour every scream, teeth bared to strip the carcass wet, and tongues to lap the vessels dry, for we are many. So what real-life serial killers could have been used by the developers to create this monstrous character? Well, there are over 22 well-known serial killers who were Vietnam War veterans. Perhaps the closest resemblance to Milton Pike was Gary Ridgway, also known as the Green River Killer. He served the US Navy on a supply ship during the Vietnam War, and on his return to America went on to kill 71 people. The vast majority of these were women and prostitutes, in a spree which lasted well into the 1990s. He would typically strangle his victims and dump many in the Green River area, and this led to his nickname after the first 4 murders. He confessed that he would often return to the bodies to further abuse, mutilate and have sex with them long after they were dead. And it wasn't until 2001 when DNA evidence linked him to 4 murders that the game was up for him. He was eventually convicted of 49 murders, but he confessed to over 70. Whilst that takes care of the Vietnam War connections, which serial killer could the developers have gotten the videotape recording idea from? Well, in modern day there are naturally many examples where murders have either been caught on CCTV or people have recorded their crimes on their phones. But with camcorder ownership being low amongst the general population before the game's release, it would take a truly shocking story to be the inspiration. One evening in 1990, Pool Hall owner Mr. Fotopoulos, who was also a counterfeiter along with his accomplice and lover Mrs. Hunt, began to get a suspicion that their 19-year-old employee could bring their illegal operation down by reporting them to the police. They drove their young victim to the woods after luring him into their car. They told him that they were going to induct him into their secret society that night. Mr. Fotopoulos began filming the events on his vintage camcorder when suddenly, whilst alone in the wilderness, his partner Miss Hunt shot their victim 3 times in the chest. Writhing in pain from the bullet blasts and holding on for dear life, our murdering lovers felt no remorse. Miss Hunt pulled Mr. Ramsey up, tilted his head back for the camera to see all, and delivered one final shot into his forehead which ended his life. The couple's sick videotape of the events was to be their downfall. As with the whole series of events captured for all to see, they were both sent to jail. Miss Hunt received a life sentence, whilst our wannabe cameraman was sent to death row. Serial killer number 4, Avery Marks. Just when you think that the game's developers had reached the depths of depravity, along came Avery Marks, better known as the home improvement killer. Born in the mid-70s to a single-parent mother, it's implied in the game that he was molested by her, but as he grew older, he took his revenge on her by murdering his mother in their home. Clearly suffering mental trauma, his killing spree didn't end there. As he grew older, he couldn't contain his killer instinct, and would cut off the power to his victims' homes before entering them with night vision goggles on. There he would slay whoever he came across, skin their bodies, and use that very skin to make furniture for his hideout. At his lair in Queens, New York, he would raise canaries as pets. Each time he would go out to kill at night, he would kill one of the canaries, skin them, and leave the bird's skull as a calling card at the scene, along with his poem which reads, "From the east the idiot monster cometh, with nails to announce his blasphemous intent. In still dark chambers it awaits the shadow, ebon body scar the power, dark messiah with hideous strength, for we are many." The inspiration for this serial killer is one of the most clear-cut of the 5. Ed Gein became more commonly known as the Butcher of Plainfield, after a sickening series of murders in the town. So shocking were these murders that he inspired many other fictitious serial killers such as Leatherface of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre fame. Ed Gein's father died of a heart failure in 1940, leaving his widow and 2 sons alone in the world. Ed Gein became extremely close to his mother and would become enraged when his other brother spoke ill of her. So much so that he murdered him by asphyxiation, but was able to get away with it because there was not enough evidence for Ed Gein to be sentenced. Now alone in the world with just his mother as his only friend and companion, they grew even closer. His mother unfortunately suffered a stroke in her early 40s, and so her son Ed was her only carer. In 1945 she suffered a second stroke and her health deteriorated further, and she eventually died at the age of 67. Now with free time in his hands, he became socially and mentally challenged. After a local hardware store owner disappeared, her son, who was a local deputy, began to make investigations which led to Ed Gein's residence after he was seen at the hardware store buying antifreeze the day before. After obtaining a search warrant for the farm where he lived, the local law enforcement swept in, and nothing, and I mean nothing, could prepare them for what they were about to uncover. The store owner was found decapitated and hung upside down in an outbuilding. Even more shocking was that she had been dressed up like a deer, and the many mutilations on her body were found to be made after she had already died. While the corpse was sickening enough on its own, what the police found next would go on to become one of the most gruesome discoveries in policing history. Throughout the premises, they found household decorations and furniture which had been crafted using human remains. These included skulls on bedposts, a wastebasket made from human skin, and a victim's face as a skin mask hidden away in a paper bag. There was even a belt made from human nipples and a pair of lips as a window shade drawstring. When being questioned, he confessed to making over 40 nocturnal visits to the local cemetery, where he would exhume bodies of the recently buried. He told officers he had planned to make a full skin suit to recreate his mother, so that in his own words, he could enter it and become her. He confessed to dozens of crimes. However, due to prohibitive legal costs, he was only ever convicted of one murder and sent to a mental facility where he lived the remainder of his life on the grounds of insanity. He died at the age of 77 due to lung cancer in 1984. Serial killer number 5, Marco Cruz. The most eccentric of the 5, Marco Cruz is better known as the Repo Man. He was given his modus operandi by the police as he used the guise of being a repo man to gain access to people's homes before brutally murdering them. He preferred to kill couples and would target homes in the Mojave Desert and Death Valley area before going about his normal day job as a DJ who specialises in 70s disco music. Marco Cruz is somewhat of an anomaly in the game, as he doesn't have many links to real life serial killers. It was perhaps that the developers were running out of time to easily flesh out this character, which would also suggest why he was located in the prison in the game for his battle with Michael Leroy. He was originally due to have his own stage in the game called The Yard, which would be set in the desert, and evidence of this is found in the game's files and unused music tracks. In perhaps a twisted link, you could look at the 1994 Repo Man Murder. Although this crime is a reversal, as the Repo Man is the one who was murdered. Tommy Morris was a repo man who was a licensed automobile repossessor in the state of Texas. At 3:30 AM, after clamping a Ford pickup truck to settle a debt, he was shot in the lungs and neck by its owner, Jerry Casey. Shockingly, however, Jerry Casey used an old Texan horse law which gave him the right to kill thieves and intruders after nightfall to escape punishment, as he had alleged that the Repo Man didn't make him aware that he was about to take his truck. Killings of repo men were not uncommon in the 90s, with around 2 per year across America. Perhaps the studio were interested in turning the tables in the game. Sadly, however, very little was known about this character, but like the rest of the 5, he would leave a calling card by the side of his victims, which serves as a reminder of his deranged mindset. For the western deserts he finds a form. He is the child of the mouth of blood, the bleakness before the beginning of time. In the glint of ice in a murderer's eye, the savage heart of every crime, for we are many. So there you have it. While the game's developers always noted they used real life serial killers as an inspiration for the game's bosses, did you realise that there were influences which came from real life serial killers? Are you also aware of any malevolent links between the real world we live in and the game's dark tones? I'd also love to know how you felt playing the game back in the day, and if you were surprised at such a gory game actually being released on a Nintendo console. Whatever your thoughts and memories, let me know your feelings in the comments section down below, and until next time.